Welcome back to the pipeline. Looking forward to this episode for a long time coming now. Honored to have Dan Matuszewski, co-founder of CMS Holdings, the M in CMS, which is a VC firm that specializes in financial services, IT, big data, fintech, and particularly blockchain and cryptocurrency. Thanks for coming on, Dan.
Thanks for having me. I like that you got all those other baskets of stuff that are VC tech buzzwords for it.
The internet is a wonderful place, and Google's AI assistant is helping me out. Yep.
It's funny. There's a funny side piece. There's a big government agency called CMS which handles Medicare services, and like for some reason they're constantly getting sued, and like we get emails all the time about it, like them suing us. It just comes into like the generic info email, and like it has nothing to do with this, but like apparently there's just like constantly lawsuits there. It's like a big org. It's like I think they employ like 10,000 people or something like that. It's like a massive thing.
I've definitely seen you tweet about that. It's wild to get caught in the crossfire like that.
Yeah. Then there's another CMS that just went bankrupt, which isn't us. I
saw that too.
Like a lawyer emailed us pitching bankruptcy services, and I was like, "What the fuck is this?" And then like I went and looked online. I was like, "Oh my god!" Like there's like a whole bunch of I have no idea what the company was, but like then like more inbound stuff started coming too. So like I gotta get ahead of this before it like gets out of control.
Yeah, no kidding. That's pretty wild. And we are also joined today by our frequent co-host Kevin, also known as @Intern, or formerly and originally known as @CMSintern. This episode is somewhat of a family reunion here. I know the community is going to be really pumped to hear from you guys. So thanks for coming on, Kevin, as well.
Yeah, for sure. No one I'd rather join on a podcast than Dan. So yeah, excited.
Well, along those lines, I don't know if crypto Twitter has ever heard the full saga of CMSintern. Dan, do you mind laying that out for us from your perspective?
Well, yeah. So Kevin was at grad school at the time, and this was like when COVID first started kicking, like for real, when they were like actually shutting stuff down. And he got reached out by a mutual friend where he had previously done an internship through, who was like, "Hey, this guy's sharp. He's like got time on his hands. There's nothing going on. Like school's like shut. I believe you were home or you were getting sent home or something like that." It was like, "Do you want to talk to him? Is there anything to do?" And this was right when everything was starting to like early 2021, when it really started to get busy very fast. And we were a small shop then. I think probably like 7 guys at the time. And we were drowning. Like there was just like more, like we couldn't keep up with the information flow. We couldn't like handle all the stuff that was like just sort of like flying across the desk. So I talked to Kevin a couple times. I think I talked to you once, and I was like, "All right, this guy's got a head on his shoulders. He's smart. Like he knows enough." And then I talked to Bobby and Julie and the other partners here, and I was like, "Hey, this guy's got some bandwidth to like basically just pick up any random work that we have." At the time, we were just like, we couldn't screen information quick enough. Like there was too much happening. So we were like, "All right, well, we'll take Kevin on for an internship," knowing he was going to go back to school. I mean, actually, to be fair, like the world was in a weird place, so we didn't know what was going to happen. But I was like, we got a window here where he's got bandwidth. Like we'll take him in. And it was great. Like Kevin like hit the ground running. Like really was way better than we thought it would be. He did have to go back, but we were like, "Listen, like do you want to keep working part-time? And then do you want to like come on full-time eventually?" When he like sort of finished, and then graduates, comes on, and it was just great. Like he like really acclimated to the whole industry like very quickly. And the CMS like intern Twitter was him. And to be fair, like the first like couple weeks, so there was a bunch of these. Like I don't know who was making them, but there were these like weird sub accounts, like a CMS dog and like a CMS bear. Remember that they were like, I don't know who was. I think it was Loomdart. I don't know that for a fact, but I like think
CMS dog. I think was Loomdart. Yeah,
I think it was. Yeah, so I didn't know who was doing it, but then there was like CMSintern, and I just didn't like think anything about it at first because I was like, all right, this is just like some. But he's like clearly making a bunch of these and like messing around. It was like funny and like the banter was fine. And then he kept hitting, and then he DM'd me and was like, "Hey, are you okay if I do this?" And I was like, "Who are you?" Like, and I was like, and you're like, "Oh, it's Kevin." I was like, I had no idea that you were like operating this. And then I was like, "Yeah, it's fine." I was like, "Just don't do anything that'll get you in trouble." And like, I don't care. Like, it's like, just don't like do anything like don't get weirdly political and like cause a headache. Like just keep it to like the crypto sphere. So it was great, and like the videos really took off. Those have obviously been like super popular, and I hope you have like a folder of all of them. Like I hope you keep like a real record of like the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's when it really started to kick off, because those get like went viral really quickly, and then people would like steal them and whatnot. But that's when I think when it like solidified as a thing, and then like kept running and growing. And now you are the intern, and I gotta ask, like, how did you get it? Like the handle?
Yeah, so there's some weird rules around Twitter handles. So like when given that question, I kind of say I did like a Twitter rain dance of sorts, and Elon Musk decided it made sense.
Okay.
But yeah, it really, like, I found the guy who had at Intern, and he hadn't tweeted in 2 years, but it was linked to a company. So I actually reached out to the customer service, like posing as someone who wanted to like buy their service. And then once I got on the phone, I was like, hey, like, full transparency, I really am just interested in this Twitter handle. Can you link me up with the guy who has it? And
That's
like
fun.
ended up, yeah, it was this awesome guy. Like he knew, he had a bunch of Twitter handles, but like I don't know, he ran businesses, super interesting guy, and basically talked to him, and he's like, yeah, I mean, I don't actually have a use for this. It seems like you do. So for sure makes sense. And then, yeah,
It's
I guess like,
you're not like really allowed to trade them, right? I don't think.
no,
Like,
yeah, you can't trade them. We ended up having to get in touch with someone at Twitter that like helped us transfer over.
okay.
But yeah, I would say too, like from my perspective as well, just some funny anecdotes from the initial intern side. Yeah, I talked initially, it was like August or July or August of 2020 when I first called Dan, because Mike Zinneman, yeah, had said that you guys were looking for someone. I was like, I'm still at school. Like, these are kind of my theses. You're like, well, what type of shitcoining are you doing? And I was like, oh God. So I like tried to think on the spot, and you're like, yeah, I mean, like, we're looking to hire someone right now. You're still in school. We can talk later. But I had that written down. Like I kind of knew the personality and what to talk about for next time. So when I called driving home for Thanksgiving, and talked to Dan for like 2 minutes. The phone call was literally like 2.5 minutes. And I was like, yeah, this is what I'm looking at. Like, really like Polkadot. I think there's a lot of cool stuff going on in DeFi. Have a bunch of bandwidth. And you're like, yeah, I mean, look, makes a ton of sense. Like, I think this is a great fit. So it was 2.5 minutes, and I text my mom, like, I think I just got an internship. And then solidified it after.
I mean, you knew what you needed to know.
Yeah, had enough context, and then yeah, I mean, all I was going to be doing the entire winter was looking at crypto stuff anyway. So, yeah, it was a great fit.
Yeah, you're right. I had that year off, but dude, COVID seems like a blur. But you're right, that was the thick of it, because 21
Yeah,
was already.
and I do think from the meme side, Dan was like, they kept talking in the chat like, we should get a full-time meme guy. Like, this is like something that's important in crypto. Like, this is, people care about it. And they were talking about, and everyone at the firm at that time is like, I don't know, like 29 to like 35 years old. And like I was like the 22-year-old or 20 at that time, just turned 23. Like, well, I'm the young kid. Like, I should know how to do the memes if anyone. So
Yeah, because Twitter was just basically like grabbing whatever like random content people made in the chat anyway. Because like we use Slack internally, and like that was just like we were just harvesting that and sharing it to the world. I was denied having a Twitter account at Circle, and it was like a big gripe of mine. So I was like very excited when I finally left to like get into it.
Yeah, like that is kind of a good segue. Would love to, like, I remember one of the early stories, Julian, who is the S in CMS, was telling me like you guys initially got into crypto. It was like college days, like early Bitcoin. And you were like, hey, this is super interesting, and like got Julian and maybe some other guys to invest in it. And then a few months later, Julian was like, oh, it like went up a ton. I sold it, made a bunch of money. Thanks, Dan. Like, did you sell any? And you're like, no, like I doubled down. Like, this thing's good. Or
So
I guess.
yeah, so that was 2013.
Okay.
Well, it was late 2012 into early 2013. So I was a couple years out because I graduated 2010. I was working at a hedge fund with Julian, which Bill worked at too, who you knew from your time here. And like Bitcoin was kind of, so there's this whole like thought that like, oh, like everybody just sort of like discovered it over time. It was like pretty known in like the trading community. Like it was like an asset, like nobody like gave it a ton of time, but like it got a lot of airtime in like the like news sort of segment. So everybody was like kind of aware of it. Nobody really knew what to make of it. It was like very much still being pitched as a payment system. And like Circle's initial vision was that like BitPay was like the big company. That eventually sort of like passed. Like the gold, there was definitely the store of value narrative, but it wasn't as dominant sort of in your face then. So anyway, like we looked at it initially and we're like, oh, like this thing like trades and it's volatile and like there's some like bid offer to capture. So we really just started doing automated, like I kind of just started doing this personally a little bit, like doing a lot of automated trading on the exchange. Because in my day job, I was doing a lot of algorithmic sort of like trading, mostly to like hedge the deltas for like our option book. Not like to get into super specifics of the TradFi part of like what my job was. So I was like, look, like I can do this, like, because the market's inefficient. Like, there's nobody there. The money is small because, like, the aggregate trading volume every day was very low. But the whole thing was dominated by pretty much Mt. Gox. Like, Gox was, call it 80% of the volume. And there was a couple other exchanges that were like, okay, Kraken hadn't really launched yet. Like, they were there, but it wasn't. They launched in like 2013 or something like that. Either way, like, it wasn't like big and liquid. Coinbase was just a brokerage model. They didn't have an exchange. That doesn't come till years later. So it was a couple of these ragtag venues that we were trading on. And a lot of them ended up blowing up. So like Bitfloor blew up pretty quickly. A couple of the ones in Canada blew up. I forget, that's like a big one that like we've been involved in. But the exchanges were like, had like a 6-month half-life and then they would be like out. They would either get hacked or they would just get like cut out of banking and be like shut down. And then Gox blows up. So like Gox blowing up kind of was like not the end, but like it shut the party out for a while. So like things were just like quiet on the back of that for like a long time. And then like stuff got really dark in like 2015. So I'm at the hedge fund with Julian and like we're trading and we do a little bit of like crypto stuff and like we make some money, but like kind of forget about it. I kind of go full time into it and go to work at Kraken. Like I take a flyer. Jesse had reached out and we got in touch because I was doing so much automated trading on Kraken. That's like how we got to like know each other. And then I'm at Kraken for a little bit. They like struggled to like, well, sorry about that. They struggled to raise financing at that time because crypto had kind of like gotten quiet on the back of 2013. And then Circle raised money in Boston. I was still in Boston and I was like, all right, like this is like a good connection because like it's local. Like I was going back and forth to San Fran a bit. That wasn't like great. I went to work at Circle, but then things got even worse. Like things got even quieter. Like through 2014, 2015 is like, there's a real lull. Like I remember looking at the screen and talking to Bobby who started CMS with me because he was at Cumberland. And like Bitfinex was the dominant liquidity venue at the time, and like 1,100 Bitcoin total had traded on the thing at like $200 a pop or something like that. So like the whole aggregate trading volume across the industry was like less than $1 million on the top exchange. So then it really seemed over. And that was when Circle sort of made decisions to move away from crypto, which ended up being very poor. But that sort of was like the segue into it. But then things kick up, and then ETH gets popular, the ICO boom, and then like the world sort of like gets where it is today. But that was like, there was definitely a window of time for like 2 or 3 years where like there was not a lot going on. It was like very unclear this like was going to happen. So sticking it out through that was like kind of the hard part. But like Julian went to work at Jana, like he left sort of the industry for a bit and then like comes back. But yeah, a lot of people bounced around out of that sort of period.
Got you. Yeah, it sounds like you've lived through it and worked full time watching crypto throughout like many of the major events, and like hearing you tell, like most people look at a price chart and they're like, oh, just every 4 years it kind of like goes up and then gets nuked sometimes and it's volatile. But like when you talk about it, it very much sounds like no, there were real things, events happening that were moving the markets around. Like Mt. Gox, obviously massive, and a lot of people are somewhat familiar with the story. But like looking at, I guess it would be interesting to hear your perspective on like crypto now versus back then. Like what has kind of changed in what moves the markets and what hasn't, what kind of stays the same? Like 2024 crypto is different from 2015 crypto. Like what are,
So there were just
yeah,
like wasn't like in 2015 crypto, you could like conceptualize everything that was going on. Like there was like just in any given day, there was just like enough information that you knew everything that was happening. And you knew everyone that was like basically trading. Like there was a little disparity because Asia was that like unique session and there wasn't like a lot of cross, even as it is today, right? Like there's still like, this is where something that's still similar is like, there's not great visibility into what's going on in Asia and the US, and the US doesn't know like what Asia is doing. Like the back and forth, like there's things that are like worth massive, like some of these, especially look at these like ordinals related projects that got like huge. And like there's kind of like no talk about it whatsoever in like the US side of the house, but it's like huge in Asia. So stuff like that. But back then, that was the only information like asymmetry that was going on. You could like really know everything that was happening in Bitcoin today, and like you could figure it out in like 20 minutes. Like there just like wasn't the depth of information, and the asset class just wasn't that broad. Like altcoins were around, but they didn't really have value. Like they were pretty immaterial, and they were all just like carbon copies of like the Bitcoin code base. There was like very few interesting things that like had been happening, and of the things that were interesting, like they didn't have real value to them at that point. Like nobody was like giving them any like time of day. And this is like why I think a lot of people who've been around for like sort of that long time frame like kind of are like Bitcoin maxi people, because they're like, we just like, we've been seeing like garbage for like so long, and they've gotten desensitized to it. I think a lot of people got head faked on ETH because of that, just because there had been so much like nonsense before. But once ETH got popular and got value and like doing interesting like things, and especially when the ICO stuff, that's when it changed. That's when like the information sort of just like hockey sticked. Like, it became impossible to keep up with what was going on like everywhere, and also you suddenly had to like care about other assets to trade with. So like as like Color, like at Circle, we didn't trade any other asset until 2016 when we started to trade ETH. So the entire business was just Bitcoin before that. And at no point was that like we're like missing out on opportunities. Like it just like wasn't a thing. But ETH got so big, and the people that we traded Bitcoin with were suddenly asking to trade ETH, that like we had to do it, because we're just like this doesn't make sense. Like we're losing business not only on the ETH side, but they are losing like our core business because people are just like taking it where they can trade sort of ETH. Like that was like the big shift. And then after ETH, sort of like once you had one second one that was like able to gain value, people are like, well, you can have a third, right? And then it like sort of like really hockey sticked, and you see like all the growth of like other, a lot of those first like chains get funded in 2017, come later, like, but that's like sort of the birth of it all. And now you just have rolling sort of like windows of like stuff getting financing and all that jazz.
100%.
So anyway,
Yeah.
the asset base it's grown massively horizontal. Like you care about more things than you ever did, and the information is just too monstrous. Like you really can't pay attention to it all anymore.
Spot on. And with that growing information base, with all those growing opportunities, that's obviously brought in a lot of traders, particularly retail and new traders at that. And I think one of the most commonly asked questions is, how much is enough to retire? So I want to ask you, is 10 million enough to retire? Why or why not? And how does that math break down?
Because I got roasted on this, and people still give me shit about it. Here's my count. Like I think crypto skews young. So let's say like the median age in crypto is 30. All right? Like you have potentially 60 years of like life in front of you, right? You can't like, if you're gonna burn 200 grand a year, like that adds up pretty quick. Like, and I get like you can like invest it and all that jazz, but like it's more money than I think they realize. And like 10's probably high, but like the point is like you can't make $1 million and be like, I'm done, I retire. Like this doesn't work. Like that math is like completely bonkers. So I don't know. And like people are like, you can go live in some shithole and like live it out there, but I don't think like that's like a viable sort of like option. So my point was like people discount how long they're going to live and how much money they're going to need over the course of that. Especially if they're going to get like married, have kids, like do the whole like sort of American dream thing. Like it's more expensive than you think, especially over the periods that they're talking about. So I don't know, that's my point. My point is that people, there's you can do this. Like most financial like retirement like product sellers like have like formulas you can use of like what you need and what withdrawal rate you can use and what like inflation expectations you can like do, and they'll like show you how. I guarantee it's more than people think it is.
I think some of the convolution or the difficulty there comes from just how global the market has become. And obviously people living outside the US, there's different opportunities, different, perhaps you wouldn't need 10 million, but yeah, could definitely agree with that in the context of the US and certainly with the situation over the past few years.
Yeah, like, $2 million is more money than I need in my life. And it's like you'd be surprised like what you'll chew through.
Yeah, I think it's literally when you tweeted that, it was basically the embodiment of that meme that's like, why would you say something so controversial yet so bold or something like that? And it's like anyone who's under 10 mil, it's like that's triggering, right? Like, oh no, you can't.
I'd be like, dude, like if you have $2 million and you're 65, that's a whole other conversation. And if you're like 25, like you threw that money quicker than you think. I don't know.
While we're on the subject of
hot
takes here, do you have any hot takes on the crypto market in general? And, what are people missing? What are you currently looking at?
So here's my hot take. I think there's been a lot of, and I'll say this, there's been a lot of this like talk about like X chain fixes X problem and they're like charting it against ETH or whatever and like being like, oh, look, like flows are moving. I think that's all bullshit. I think it's just like people are like assets are generally just trading with their beta. So like assets that got creamed harder in the bear over the last period have just like risen faster and higher in like percentage terms off the lows than like other like Bitcoin and ETH like look boring and flat relative to like all the high flying L1s that are like sort of out there. And like I think people are using like every community is just pointing to that and being like, oh, we're winning or whatever, or like we're and I just think that's bullshit. I think that's like a bunch of nonsense of like just trying to like look at how like the assets are generally performing in line with how their like risk profile is, and then extrapolating out some like movement of like and new narrative. So I don't know. I think that people like, and there may be some truth to it, but it's I mean, it's a little bit of crypto Twitter just like loving to have a victory lap, but I think that's being like overstated as opposed to just like, hey, everything's ripping. The longer tail stuff is really ripping, and this is good, but this is like how like bull markets generally like function. It's not like a new regime. Like the world hasn't really changed.
I think that's a lot of
that's
this.
That's my hot take.
Yeah, I'm in line with that, and I think a lot of this is. I'll let you go, Kev. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I wanted to ask because we're coming up on, I think of one tweet that you sent out like 3 months ago, Dan, when everyone was talking about the Bitcoin ETF. And you were like, because people had it as like 65% chance it gets approved before the new year. And you're like, yeah, I don't think it happens. And someone asked you why. You're like, well, look, it's about to be October, and then Halloween happens. And then it's basically Thanksgiving. And after Thanksgiving, it's like the holidays and the year's over. So like nothing's going to get through in that point. And whether or not that was the case, like it turned out to be right. But like Bitcoin ETF has been a massive catalyst, like through the end of last year. People are super excited about it. And I know it's been something like 10 years since the initial filing.
The first ETF filing was the Winklevoss twins in 2013. So it'll be a little more, right? So it'll be 11 if it happens in the next month.
Yep.
I think it was actually kind of around February that they did it, something like that.
Gotcha. So yeah, coming in just under the 11-month mark, hopefully, or 11-year mark, hopefully. I feel like you have unique perspective around the Bitcoin ETF, and not to put you on the spot there, but like you've been looking at this for a super long time. Like, it seems like it's actually happening now. Like, massive win. Like, do you think it's in general like overhyped, underhyped? Like, will it be important in the grand scheme of things, or like, how do you kind of think about the ETF?
Yeah, I think actually Andrew Kang had like an interesting tweet about it yesterday or this morning or something like that, which I kind of generally agree with. So it's big. It's big because there's like a lot of passive flows into TradFi products, like specifically like equities, right? Like if you just like look, like there's always a buyer of like US equities, right? Like that's just every paycheck, like there's just sort of capital that's like pushed into that. And like there's like constant sort of like flow into it. So like access into that same pipeline, I think is like very important. This also just like is an access thing, right? Like this opens up a pool of potential buyers that like were probably trapped out of, or at least like slowed down considerably from like owning the asset class. So I think it's very important. What I think there's going to be some noise when this thing launches, right? Because like everybody's going to be looking at like there's X dollars of inflows in the first whatever 2 weeks, and like that will either under or over sort of like sell people's like yardstick in their head of like where it's at. I don't have a good feel for how that's going to play. I don't know enough about how the pipeline of like flows works with these funds. Like just because something gets listed doesn't mean people are going to go buy it. Like yeah, retail can, but that doesn't mean like any like random sort of like RA is going to start pushing it, or like any random fund can like even like buy it. Like just because something's there doesn't mean you do it day one. So like this stuff takes a little bit of time is my guess. But I do think it's going to be like a passive like flow of like additional money that like is flowing into the ecosystem over time. So I think it's a big like long tail boom for the asset class and the overall industry. I just think it's like if you're looking at that first window of time and like you're going to extrapolate out from it, you're just going to get burned. Like I just don't think that's like a good way to like trade this thing. That being said, like the funding is kind of jacked, But there's some like other good reasons that funding is jacked. Like a lot of BITO product as a way to bridge access into the ETF. So like there's a little bit of weirdness here where not all the ETFs may get approved, right? And like there's a good reason to believe that Grayscale's ETF won't get approved. And I really like say you should like listen to those like two guys from Bloomberg, Jeff and Eric or whatever. Like they're pretty on with this stuff and they know more than anybody. So that's really where you want to like glean information about this, like the mechanics and timing and like who will get approved and whatnot. But if Grayscale doesn't get approved, like that's not great because like it'll trade at a little bit more of a discount and then the other products will gain inflow. So people are selling Grayscale, buying BITO or buying futures to like keep their exposure on, but then plan to buy the ETF, right? So they want to get rid of Grayscale, but they want to buy the ETF and they're bridging it with futures. So funding has gotten very jacked and that's like a part of it. So I think like you need to just like watch out. Like that's like fucking with pricing a little bit. It's just like how high the financing sort of is. But if all that rolls into spot and it's just like a temporary thing, I don't think it's going to matter as much. And if there's more inflows coming in, then it really doesn't sort of matter at the end of the day. I don't know. It's like all along way of saying is like, it's all very good, but like, don't get caught up in the weeds of like whatever happens in the first couple weeks. Like if you don't need to be like actively trading, like don't. Like if you want to and take a punt, like that's fine. But like don't, if you like are a long-term holder of any of this stuff and you're just going to like base a decision off that, like that's a bad idea. Like let it baseline and figure out like sort of stuff. The other catch is there's no clear winner here. And there's a lot of like well-funded sort of like providers looking to like get out there and get this thing first. And these things are kind of an AUM game, right? So like whoever can get the most AUM, get the most AUM and like win, right? So like it is a little bit of a winner takes all situation. So there's going to be massive fighting in advertising between these guys to like get this thing out there. So you're going to be inundated with like ads for this thing. And I think that's actually really good because it's going to be like a ton of like additional exposure, like coming from like non-sketchy sources of like, for like crypto. Like it's not going to be like Terra like doing the Washington baseball team, right? Like it's going to be like BlackRock running an ad on like, I don't know, some boomer golf channel or something. Like that's like the sort of difference on it. So I think it's going to be pretty important, the amount of ad dollars that flow into it. It's a big market opportunity. Like somebody's going to make a lot of money on this and it's unclear who. So you're going to get a lot of competition for like eyeballs for it, which is just good for the asset.
Yeah, I remember there was that a video of Larry Fink on, I think it was CNBC, and he was like, yeah, I mean, we're seeing a pump in Bitcoin. I think he was not in touch with Cointelegraph Intern, like putting out that like it got approved. He's like, you're seeing a pump, and you know it's because there is like 3 safe asset classes, right? It's like gold, oil, and crypto.
He's got to buy.
And it was like Larry Fink I think of all like most of the money in the world is with people that are like 50 years and older. And like they don't trust the hooded sweatshirt crypto trader who's saying like this could be a big thing. But like Larry Fink is like the guy, right? Like he's the source of truth for a ton of this stuff and what they believe. So I think him telling you Bitcoin is a good play is different from like CL talking about the open OI and saying this is a good trade or something. One more just to cap off the ETF side. BlackRock also filed for the ETH ETF. Do you think that they're like ETH is obviously the next step. Do you think there is a future where like someone sees a market opportunity, they're winning, they're the dominant player on the Bitcoin ETF? Like does ETH get approved? And then if that happens, like does the long tail end up just like, do they move down the list of CoinGecko? And
so it'll probably be only things that have CME futures. My guess is like in the future, we're going to see the cadence of CME future trades for a year, 2 years, then ETF. I don't think anybody's going to skip it. I'm very skeptical, like for a while, that the SEC will get comfortable letting something list that hasn't like taken that cadence. So I think ETH is, I think, look, if there's a Bitcoin ETF, like I'm like pretty much like a 75-80 delta that you get an ETH one in a year. I don't think it'll be anything else though. I don't think it's going to go further down the line. I don't think we're going to like see like I mean, everybody's like, is Sol like going to be like have one? I don't think that's like realistic. Maybe you'll get a Sol future in a year. That's big, but like I don't think you're going to have the ETF. Not for a while. Well, there's a little bit of like weirdness though with ETH where they're going to have to figure out what to do with the staking.
Yeah. It seems like whoever is in charge of structuring that is moving around billions of dollars with one swoop of the pen.
Yeah. The ETH one's going to be a little complicated of how they're going to make that product. I think they're going to get it done. Like because they have the future, I think it's like a pretty clear one. They'll push it. And here's the thing. If you get like, they won't want this, right? Like if you get the Bitcoin one and it gets a ton of AUM, like you're gonna try to get the ETH one through as quick as possible. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's a little more complicated, and they're gonna make it wait. Like it's just gonna be some time.
It seems like you might have some pretty good color on the institutional side of things as a whole. So would love to hear as well, what does the environment in your perspective look like for institutional crypto adoption? And can you outline how these guys are looking at crypto right now?
Yeah, it's an uncorrelated asset which has like alpha. You got to remember, like a lot of larger asset managers, like there's only so many things you can do to like get returns, right? Like, and I'm not talking about like the Chicago prop shop sort of thing. I'm talking about a guy who's like, I want to beat the S&P 500 by 2% a year, and like that's how I make my money. Like you can have like better asset selection within like sort of the basket of things like you're trading. You can like also add in uncorrelated sources of alpha, right? Like things that like should go up in value over time that do not exhibit sort of the same return profile as like the underlying asset that you got. Like you can't just like ram in more equities because then you just have more equities. So Bitcoin's good because it is pretty uncorrelated and it also goes up. So like that is like a good thing to like weave into like a basket. And it's good because now you can be like, look, we have a crypto strategy overlay that adds whatever 150 bips of alpha over 10 years like to the product, and boom, that's your edge. That's what you're selling, and that's how you make money. So I think that's how you're generally going to see it like shoehorned into positions as a minority position that you can add to a basket of existing sort of fixed income and equities that adds alpha over time. I think that's how you're going to sell it, and I think that's going to be pretty popular.
Yeah, Dan, I've had I don't know, the pleasure of like the past 3 years getting to hear a bunch of like your stories around trading and things along those lines. Would love if there's like anything that sticks out as like either your best trade of all time or like the craziest trading experience you've ever had. I'm sure a lot of them you can't like just throw out on a podcast, but like if anything sticks out in your mind as like this was like a crazy thing that happened in crypto, or just best trade of all time and how that compares to other stuff.
I think the craziest period of trading was like that day when everything blew up with COVID, like where like BitMEX basically pulled the plug from the exchange, like going to zero, and then like FTX blew up. Like not like it obviously blows up later, but like stopped working on the lows and like basic. So I remember I have a picture of it somewhere. ETH basis went like plus 20%, not in annual terms, like in like whatever ETH was like 20 and it was trading it sort of like 24 on the future, and then like went to like 18. Like the basis was like moving 20% plus or minus like in a half hour, like off like the underlying. And that was like the wildest trading we ever did. We did enough trading there to like not die when like the whole thing like blew up because they were able to capture it. But like the venues were falling down, and like you really didn't know your counterparty exposure was. Like when 3 hours blew up and all the lenders started dying, like there was risk, but like the day after that event happened in the market, like you had no idea who was solvent or not. And a lot of people weren't. A lot of people faked it, got lucky, and the market like kicked back up and they like survived it. But like you really had no idea if any exchange, any counterparty, like whatever was like sort of like good the next day. And then like TradFi was blowing up too. Like that was when like the commodities went negative. Like equities were limit down. Like it was just like, that was the craziest probably week of trading that I've ever seen in my life across the board. And it was probably for most people in most asset classes. There was like weird shit that happened in the beginning. Like Bitcoin would like have moves that would like double in a 24-hour period that we don't really see anymore. It's just like there was just like less at risk, and like there was just like not as much going on. So like it didn't matter as much. There was like real money moving through the system in like the COVID crash, which like made it like bonkers. So I think that was like also one of the weirdest periods of trading was the 48 hours after FTX finally shut, and we were trying to like lose money in our FTX account and like gain it elsewhere. That's like a way to like get money out of the exchange. Like we were trying to do trades that we would think would lose money, and it was one of the weirdest like periods of like trading that we ever had. And we were like somewhat successful, but it was just ridiculous. I don't know. That was a weird period too.
I think one of the most unique things is while you're trading, while you're, running CMS and deep in the markets, you're one of the more vocal traders, especially in terms of venture capital on Twitter. And you've had some really amazing quotes in the past, namely the hot ball of money phenomenon And do you want to make money or do you want to be right? Can you kind of unpack those quotes or, what does that mean?
I didn't invent either of these, by the way. These are like somewhat tropes like in the industry. Like in traditional sort of like the hot ball of money thing, I think was like about China for a long time. Like that was like a big like, just like how you talk about like the Chinese like market is like, it was because it would just like move from equities to real estate to like random shit to like some like commodities like back. And you would like see it like moving through like that world. And then like I don't know, like some of these things I think are just like so old you don't even know who like they're attributed to anymore. But the like being right versus making money is like the market's gonna tell you one thing, like don't be smarter than it. Like sometimes like it doesn't matter if like you think something's wrong for like fundamental reasons. Like the market might just do what it needs to do. So like don't fight that. It's like sort of like the general thing. And you see this in crypto a lot, right? Like there's a lot of times where you can be like, this is ridiculous. Like people do this all the time where they're like, this thing's flying for no reason. Like I'm going to go short it. Like it shouldn't be that. And then you just get toasted because it continues to like act more irrationally. It's very like crypto thing. And I think people definitely hunt that on purpose, but I get the liberty of like saying whatever I want because like we don't have LPs, so like I don't have to worry about like offending anybody or like having to go like raise. Right? You can't like. I mean, I guess like nothing I say is like out of the markets. Like, and I don't like try to like dip into the political landscape of things, but like you can really get yourself in trouble if you start like picking sides and things, and then like you just like don't want to have opinions on about a lot of stuff publicly if you like need to go like raise money from people elsewhere.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it's if you're young in your career, like don't do that either because like keep that to yourself. Don't put it on the internet.
Yeah, I remember one of the craziest days I would say craziest days of my life, but like for sure professionally, was like waking up the morning that Bitcoin actually broke through 20K and like Bitcoin ripped through 20K and just like continued to march. And I remember it was like we all hopped on a all hands Zoom. So everyone was talking, and you're like, Bitcoin's ripping up, we're managing the positions, and then you're like, all right, hop all the money. Like it's gonna flow, right? Like it's gonna flow. You want to be first. Where's it gonna go? And it was like just following that. I think it was like 5 or 6 consecutive, like it was like, all right, this is the flow, and then position, and then like an hour later it would follow, and then we're like, all right, next flow. And watching that unfold, I was like, I was still in college. I'm like, this is an unbelievable, like the fact that these guys are doing it and it would just consistently hit. It was one of the craziest things that I've ever seen.
I think that's how we made a lot of our money in that period. It's like we was just like realizing that like it was going to go somewhere else, and then like trying to like it was guessing too. It was like, all right, a lot of it was like I remember I used to ask, I'd be like, what hasn't gone up in the last 7 days, and be like, all right, let's just buy that. Like it was just like kind of like and just like figuring out like where is it going to like go because it just kept moving through, and it was like it happens every time. Like Bitcoin and ETH, well now it's Bitcoin and ETH, but it used to be just Bitcoin, but they rip, they baseline, and then the money just like disperses out into like the corners of the world. The problem in which it's hard is keeping on top of like what the things are that matter, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like that changes every cycle. Like, I mean, like you pick one up that like Sol is now like sort of a solidified like basket of like things that matter. But like, it's not like you didn't want to be like trading Litecoin and BCH like in the 2021 like rip, right? You know, you wanted to be like in like Matic and Axie, whatever, you know, like whatever, like that thing of basket of things that mattered. It's pretty easy to know it because you just look at the volume, but like that is like the job is like staying abreast of that sort of world.
100%. And when we're looking at volume today and when we're looking at narrative, I think there's been a lot of inflows on the parallel EVM narrative. So I want to ask, what do you think about Monad?
Do you guys like all have say up on like your charts? Do you like have it on your screen? Is it like company policy? Do you have to, is that like, you just like have to watch it?
I think this is one of those things where if you're young and you're working and you're not supposed to have an opinion on something, this is one where I'll plead the fifth on it.
Put you on the spot because I think it's good. It's a proxy for your guys' interest. So look, you guys have more interest out there. Like more people ask me about you and being at Monad in the last like month than I think in the last year combined. Like, and it's pretty ubiquitous. Like it's a lot of everyone has like an interest in it. And most I'd say like it skews probably 75 to 80% like good, and then there's like 20% like there's 20% of everything that like people are just like skeptical on. There's like I think a lot of Sol people in particular that are a little skeptical, just because I think that's like probably viewed more as the threat layer if like there had to be one like established to it. But Yeah, I mean, look, I think like the pitch is very compelling and interesting. I think like the biggest thing the market's looking to do is like it's a lot of just saying things right now, right? So like until I think like the rubber hits the road on a lot of this stuff, like you won't see a ton more like conversion on like people that are like, yeah, this is like gonna work and like this is the thing. Like I think people are like, I'm not technical enough to get into it, and I'm not. We have people here that are, and like I ask them their opinion of it, but like they're the very technical people tend to be the most skeptical too. So like sometimes getting them to like give you an answer is like hard. You know, I mean, you know who is like try to think about like ask Brian if something is like gonna
Yeah.
work. Like there's a 95 delta that he's gonna be like no, and it's like all right, well like can I push you a little bit here to like expound that like maybe this will like. I mean, this was true. This was actually true when ETH launched. All the Bitcoin sort of developers were like, this will never work. This is a scam. This can't happen. So like, this is like a very tried and true. And when Sol was going, all the ETH guys were like, this can't be done. It doesn't scale yet. It's just like, this is, there's a saying, and I forget who put it out, but like one of the big top guys, I think it was for the Atomic Project, was like science advances like one death at a time. And like the idea is that like, it's just like you need, like, it's hard. Like people get like fixated and they don't think outside, and like they won't let themselves like believe in other sort of things with like it's technical or scientific or whatever. And like sometimes that's just like the time is the only thing that like fixes it, and like having a new crop of people do it. So I don't know. Look, I'm immensely excited for you guys to give this thing a go. Like on the technical level, like I don't know, but like there's a lot of people that are very excited about it that I like lean on. And you have the market interest, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think it's very much been like I remember I've said this a million times before, but people are like, "Oh, were you like looking for a position when you joined Monad?" And I was like, "No, very vocally, I never planned to leave CMS ever in my entire life." Right? Like my plan after like seeing what was happening for 6 months is like, I'm gonna work here forever. This is the best company. Like I got super lucky and landed at a 10 out of 10 spot straight out of school. And there's like no way that I don't know, over the venture side of CMS, I probably saw like, I don't know, for over 3 years, like maybe 2,000 pitches or something along those lines. And like nothing, like there was nothing where I was ever like, oh, this is like potentially we're spending more time on. Like CMS is like, I don't know, it's one of the most special companies that I've ever seen, or it's probably the most special company I've ever seen. Amazing spot. And then I think with the Monad thing, yeah, it was like, I have no idea. Like I do not have the technical chops to understand this. And then after looking at it for like 6 months, once it was like, this might work, it was just one of those moments where it was like, if this is actually as good as I think it is, and I don't join, I'll be on like suicide watch, just coping so hard at this thing working. And I thought it was going to work. So yeah, it's been cool. It's like validating to see a lot of other super smart technical people kind of converging on like, this is a really good idea. This moves crypto forward. And yeah, very excited for the rubber to actually hit the road. I think there's a lot of marketing from other teams. Like I think there's been a lot of projects that are kind of like, all right, like shit, we don't really have anything going. Like everyone's excited about parallel EVM. I'm just gonna slap it on our marketing, and like it's worked a lot, right? Like
it's a very good strategy. If you're like a liquid L1 and like your current strategy isn't working, like why not? I made a joke with somebody because they were like, "Why is Say interesting?" I was like, "Oh, it's a monad killer before monad exists." I was like, "That's like pitch." I was like, "It's hilarious," but I was like, "It's working." Like, so I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I think that it's like, yeah, we have to wait until it's actually live and running, and like, yeah, the rubber actually hits the road.
Wait,
I think there's a lot of sorry.
Can I pause? I have one question.
Yeah.
How do you say it? Is it monad?
Yeah, so both are right.
Okay.
I think like there's like a American pronunciation and a UK pronunciation. And I forget which is which, but monad and monad are both right.
Okay,
It's
so
one of those things where the founder was actually like everyone on the team said monad, but like everyone's first impression is to say monad. And like I brought it up early, I was like, we should just change how we say it. Like there's you don't want like the aptos confusion, and then like everyone just feels like they're wrong all the time.
Well, and he said this in the beginning because a lot of people called it eth. And like that was like a big fight for like 6 months until like the eth people gave up.
Yeah. I think Kobe, one of the earliest times where I was like seriously looking at monad or monad, Kobe's like, your name rhymes with gonad. Like,
Yes.
what are, and you pick this name, like you get one name. So I think leaning into that's actually been pretty funny. Like that's the first joke everyone makes, and then I don't know, our community like calls himself the Nads now, which is like, I don't know, it's mimetic. Right?
Yeah.
If people can meme something, then it's good.
Okay. I like the dual name. I think we should stick with that.
Yeah, I mean both are right? Monad or monad. I tried to switch to saying monad because I always said monad, and now I'm going back. I think monad is just like, I don't know. I need to look up which is the American because I needed to adopt the American one. Because if we're pushing the European pronunciation, that's not good.
Yeah, that's Paz. Everybody here said monad. And then actually we didn't start thinking about it until you made the video and we played it and you said it differently. And we were like, oh, is this how this is pronounced? That's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, I think we need like an official statement from Keone.
Yeah. Like, well, just yeah, it's too late. He's like tainted. You need him to just like say it without being prompted to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
No. He's got, by the way, he has great street cred. Nobody I have talked to that has any like workings with him, actually in his previous life in TradFi or in like that does not speak extremely highly of him.
Yeah, I would working with him over the last 6 months. I'm like, I feel very lucky that like my two main bosses have been Dan and Keone. I think that Sorry?
Said no rugs so far.
Yeah, 2 for 2. But yeah, Keone, I remember we hopped on, and Danny, maybe we edit this one out, maybe not, but we hopped on an investor call with this company that just got intro by someone who used to work with Keone, like at Jump when he was leading their HFT team. I think anyone who works with him kind of comes away with that impression, which is awesome signal.
Yeah, no, it's a couple people have like said it to me that worked with him. I guess was he at Gecko before?
He was somewhere for 2 years before working HFT, and then got handpicked by one of the co-founders of Jump to like learn from him on the HFT side for a year, and then he was the main. He was leading the team for strategy and quant stuff for 7 years, and then our CTO James was kind of like the genius architect, like taking all the ideas and putting them so that the computer could run it. Nice. It's really like a dynamic duo. James is our CTO is like crazy, like off the charts good with computers. So hopefully it works.
Sweet.
Cool. And I know, we're coming up on time. We have about 4 minutes. Going to do a fork of the up only final question. They would do final alpha. So it was essentially, one piece of advice that to either someone who's like deep in crypto, someone who's looking to get involved, learn more, really just something that like, it doesn't even have to be crypto specific, but just like one kind of last message, piece of advice, something for someone who's like, young, looking to do cool things with their work. Just anything that you found that like, resonates and is kind of one of the core fundamental things that you think is important. If you have any final alpha to drop.
I'd say there's 2 things. Like one is like cut it with the leverage. Like that is not getting with anything with 22. It's like you just shouldn't. Like we got even hurt by this a little bit because our lenders fell down. Like that was like a problem. Like I mean, you were there for that.
Yeah,
that was like not great. Like that was like that hurt us in ways that I didn't expect to be hurt. Just like being forced to unwind things and forced to like close stuff at not opportune levels because our counterparties died. Like I didn't think that was like a very low problem. Here's the thing that I think also is like interesting is like there's second order and third order effects in like those leverage markets that like are very unclear. It was like I should have known better, but like one lender dying meant effectively every lender died. So then I was like, oh, so I'm not really like hedged if I have the borrow spread out. Like that didn't really work. So I don't know. That's like a big one. And I think the other one is just like trade less. Like if you have like a thesis, just like don't trade it a lot. Just like wait. I don't know. That's like been the biggest headache. And probably like the biggest thing, like the biggest self-own I've had over the like decade of doing this. Like it was wild. It's like, I mean, there were times that we were trading 100,000 blocks of like ETH, like units, and like they were a couple $100,000. Like, like now I look back and I was like, would have been a lot easier to have just like sat on that and like not got the brain damage that I did doing all the other stuff. But, I mean, it's easy to look at hindsight on that too, but I think like in general, people trade too much and they like undo their own like right decisions, especially in this industry. I think like everyone feels they have to be trading all the time. I don't think that's like smart. If you want to do it because you think it's fun, like that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, I think two words of wisdom that everyone who's been around the block in crypto would 1,000,000% agree with.
Yeah,
I think the problem is that for like every one person who like makes it on leverage, like 100 or 1,000 people get carried out, but you only ever hear about the one person who made it. So it just seems like a better, like there's almost like a selection bias for people who get a big name.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, that I agree with that. I mean, that being said, though, in 22 we saw some like big people like Barry and Three Arrows.
Yep.
And FTX, I guess, is less leverage and more just theft. But like,
for sure.
Well, that's
All right, Danny,
a great final. I think that's a great final note. Some final alpha to end on here. So really appreciate you joining us, Dan and Kevin, former CMS intern, current at intern, but also working on eco growth at Monad. The community's going to love this one for sure. So thanks for coming on, guys.
Sweet.
Yeah, appreciate the time, Dan. This was great.
Let's run it back soon.